Greetings, saxophone people. Today in this video I'm going to discuss a requested topic which will be the Otto Link family of vintage mouthpieces. So I'm going to start at the Tone Master. Alright, we're going to go Tone Master, and then we're going to go, Tone Master, the New York Tone Master, and then we're going to go to the early Super Tone Masters known as the double rings, and then the transitional pieces, and then into the Florida models. Double rings, no USA Supertone Masters, USA Supertone Masters, early Babbitt pieces, and the like. And we have, we'll talk about the metal pieces, and we'll talk about the hard rubber pieces for what I have. And we'll also discuss a few of the brass Dukoff models. So we're going to go through the range. We're going to talk about the details, the identifying characteristics, some of the playing characteristics, the design changes, and maybe we'll get some play test in there too. So welcome on the journey, and thanks for watching.
All right, so leaving off from the early Babbitt metal pieces, now I neglected to talk about the ligatures for the early Babbitt pieces, and there's a reason for that. It's because they're starting to suck. You know, the quality is being reduced, and the ligatures are really just a sort of an afterthought. And the early Babbitt ligatures are okay. They're better than the later, and current period Otto Link ligatures, but they're not much better. They're just okay. They can still work pretty good if you get a good one, but they're not this robust, and they don't have the same sound. They don't clamp the same way as the earlier, Florida Links and such. So, and I don't have any, or I do probably have one. Probably slightly destroyed. They again don't have the sleeve around the screw. They're just less of something. So let's take a look now. These are some Dukoff mouthpieces that I consider to be kind of in the Otto Link family. I mean, they're not made by Otto Link, but a lot of the people who would be playing Otto Links would also be looking at these because they also have round and somewhat large chambers. Okay, they're a similar design. So we're going to take a look. Now, I'm not a history expert. I have restored a lot of mouthpieces. I know a fair amount about the designs and such, but I can't tell you the exact dates of things and, by serial number and all that. So we're just going to kind of wing it. And I don't know if the Stubby, what is known as the Stubby, or just the iconic Bob Dukoff mouthpiece, the brass one, which is this one, I don't know if that came before the Hollywood or after. I am thinking it came after, but I could be wrong. But we're going to look at the Hollywood first. And the Hollywoods do have a number of models. The first Hollywoods, I don't have any of those here on hand. And again, there's a reason for that. It's because I don't like them. I don't like them, so I don't buy them. The first Hollywood Dukoff mouthpiece was a solid casting. They probably cast it back to front, I'm guessing, because in the middle of the chamber there's kind of a throat. It's like a speed bump for the sound, speed bump for your air. It's like a big block in the middle of the throat, which kind of makes the mouthpiece suck. It's like closes down right at the throat and it stops your air. And I always hated that thing. So whenever I would get an early version Hollywood Dukoff, I would get in there and I would file out that block, open it up, and they would play a lot better. So it has this weird block in the middle of a chamber, right at the back of the window, and it also, they have no baffle, and they have pretty straight sidewalls. So it's, in a way, it's kind of a cheap casting that they didn't put a ton of, they didn't want to get in there and have to mill it all out and change. That's actually pretty difficult to do, and that's why the Otto Links, the Tone Masters, all those Florida Otto Links, in fact, still all Otto Links, they are made in two halves. Okay, do I have a piece that has? So this one has no plating. They are made in two halves, but this is you can't see it. It's okay. There you go. See the seam? See that line running right there? Okay, so these Otto Links were expensive mouthpieces to make. So what they did was, at least as far as I know, it's called pressure die cast. And so each half of the mouthpiece, it sits in a mold. So you have the relief side of the mold, and then you have an inner side of the mold as well. So the mouthpiece, the cast for the mouthpiece is 4 pieces. You have an outside and an inside to this half, and then an outside and inside to the other half. And then when you've cast the 2 halves, then you have to braze them together. You know, I was told this was silver solder together. I had one that was coming apart, and at the time, you know, I took it to a jeweler. I said, hey, can we braze this back together? Because I didn't have a silver solder outfit. And I said, can we braze it back together? And he heated it up, and he was going to braze it back together. He started heating it up and melted right away. He said, oh, this isn't brazed, this is soft soldered, which amazed me. It's just normal soft solder. Anyway, the whole point is to get the rounded out, see it's scooped out under that sidewall, right? To get the rounded out dimensions, I mean, if you have to do that by hand, it's very hard to fit tools in there to do that, to drill it out. So that was the advantage of having a 4-piece cast, so that you could actually create the contours, larger inner contours of the chamber in the casting process, instead of having to get in there after the piece is made and mill it out. So the first Dukoffs, they're just like, they weren't cast. It's probably too expensive. You know, he's like, let's make a cheap copy. And you know, Otto Link, they would have had to spend a lot of money on that tooling, because what it is you have 4 pieces and you pressure inject the brass. You have to like squirt it in there under high pressure, so there's no bubbles. That gets the bubbles out. And you know, I'm sure somebody else who knows better about machining will correct me on these, but that's my impression, is that you squirt it in high pressure to get the bubbles out and have the density. And then the casting, die cast, is that you slam it with a massive machine hammer. So when the metal's still hot and you've pressure injected that liquid metal in there, and then you just slam it, smash it closed, and it compresses the metal, and there you have your casting, and then you braze them together, which kind of gets rid of the problems of bubbles and low density and things like that. But the tooling to do that, I mean, you have to have a massive machine hammer outfit, and then you have to pay for the die casting to be made. It's a lot of money, and now it's way expensive to do that if you were to buy that tooling. But back then, in that money, back in the 30s or whatever, I mean, that was not cheap either, I'm sure. So Dukoff, when he got into business, he probably said, well, let me see if I can do this cheaply. And he made kind of a cheap casting, and he didn't get inside there with tooling to mill it out. And it had flat sidewalls and a big block in the chamber. And it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's a dead duck of a mouthpiece, but some people like them. The earlier Hollywood Dukoffs have a serial number which starts with K or D, all right? So it's like K and then numbers, or D and then numbers, usually 3 numbers, but it can be less. And so I don't really deal with those. I don't bother with them. But then they made a change. Maybe he made some money off those and then spent it on research and development and bought himself some tooling. And then they started doing pressure die cast and brazing together in 2 halves. And that's this mouthpiece, okay? This is the round chamber Dukoff, okay? And so this mouthpiece, see that serial number? X3. When you find the Dukoffs that say X on them, that's the two-piece Dukoff with a round chamber. It's the prototype. They say X. Some of the X mouthpieces, they can look exactly like the earlier ones from the outside. They're finished the same shape, the same way, but the inside is different, and you can tell because it says X. All right. This is actually the earlier design. The outside, it looks exactly, well, almost exactly. It's got a slight difference, which is like it's a little wider, okay? It's a little wide. You can't tell because I don't have the other ones here, but it's a little wider than the earlier model. It has a slight aesthetic difference out here. Some of them, they'll say like, you know, Bob Dukoff, like all-star model and things like that. This is just a normal one, but it's still prototype, first production, and you can see there's your seam. See your little solder line here. Okay, so this is the first of the best Hollywood Dukoffs. This bite plate has been repaired. These bite plates are made of a white material that just eventually, after so many decades, it just sort of starts to degrade like chalk in your mouth. It's not the most pleasant thing. It's not the most pleasant thing to be eating while you're playing. Although, you know, maybe it's high in calcium, so hey, bite away. Hollywood Dukoffs, they did like a silver and gold plating, but it's very light and they wear off super fast. You know, the plating does not last on these. They certainly were not spending extra money on better plating. So this is what it looks like. All right, these Dukoffs, they got a bit of baffle to them. Look at that. They took the Tone Master design. So this, when we talk about the Dukoff, we're equating it with this time period. Okay, Tone Master, early. Okay, they're early. All right. So this is like 40s, I would think. 40s. I doubt it's even into the 1950s. It could be, but it's got a pretty significant bit of baffle here. I mean, this is no joke. You're looking at this, it's like, that's a hump. That's like, all right, Dukoff was like, look, guys, you know, I'm going to disrupt your industry. Watch me throw a wrench into your works here. He thought he was going to screw them all up, making a brighter mouthpiece and giving people some zing, you know, giving them some thrill. Well, he was right. I mean, people did like these mouthpieces. I think they went over pretty well, but still, you know, that didn't threaten Otto Link's business. It's got pretty scooped out sidewalls there. No doubt about that. They're scooped out. They did a lot of machining. Does this have... So he milled these out too. He milled these... Sorry, that was a nice shot of my hand and the hairs on my hand. You're welcome for that. You can't see it. No matter what I do with the light here, you're not going to see. You know, it's milled out, but it's pretty smooth and it's not huge. These pieces are smaller chambers than the Links, okay? That is the innovation. They are smaller. They have more baffle. So they're like a Tone Master with a little more projection. That is not a joke. There's no lie about that. They do project better than Tone Masters. They're brighter. Doesn't mean Tone Master's not good. It is, but these are different, okay? This has been used. The plating has worn off. It has a very thin tip rail, and Dukoffs usually do, of this period, okay? You can see how thin the side rails are, and there's your thin tip rail, but he did the baffle nicely, so it just rolls right into the tip rail, okay? That's a big baffle. This is a, what are we? It's a 5. See, they face this way. There's your 5, okay? This is small size, and it's an excellent playing mouthpiece. I've kept this one for many years. It's really, really great sound. All right. Now let's move on. We'll play the X3 prototype two-piece Dukoff. Two-piece Hollywood Dukoff. This is a small facing, so I don't think it's going to go with this reed. This is a soft reed. Well, softer anyway. I don't think these... I have my doubts that they'll make friends, but we'll see. Boy, if that mouthpiece isn't just great. I love this piece. So it reads a little bit soft. But just for fun, let's see what happens when we put that harder one on there. All right, let's give it a whirl. So it goes with that reed. To me, it feels a little bit hard, but how it feels to me doesn't necessarily matter in terms of how it sounds. It just makes me play worse. If I don't feel comfortable, I play worse. But it shows you the sound of the mouthpiece pretty accurately. And then from here, okay, we'll look at the stubby. I don't know whether the stubby, maybe it's earlier, maybe it's later, or maybe it's concurrent with the others. Okay, so this is a Dukoff stubby. It's a number 6. You see the facing is always on the back here. Bob Dukoff. The aesthetic qualities of these mouthpieces are a little sloppy. You know, you'll see like things like this where it's like just uneven. They didn't cut it, you know, cleanly, and the lines are not, you know, they just weren't. They were like, whatever, just draw some lines on there, throw it out. Serial numbers on the shank, usually like that. It says Dukoff. Sometimes they're a little bit different. There's some variants. Got some other things on them sometimes. Usually say Dukoff on the back here. Sometimes they say Bob Dukoff, but I can't remember exactly. I've had a lot of them over the years. Look at that. Squared off tip rail finish. Can we see that? There we go. See? Similar squared off finish. That's a Dukoff style. Very similar to the Hollywood. It's got a bit of baffle. More of a rollover. These usually have a more rollover baffle. One of the claims to fame about this mouthpiece is they just have a high floor. They still got a pretty big chamber, but they're kind of like a tone master, and they got a high floor. And they do. They play more compact than a tone master, but there's some character difference. They're less spread. A Hollywood, a Dukoff Hollywood is less spread. These tend to be a little more spread, but I can't say they're exactly brighter. They're just maybe... I'm sorry, these are the ones that are more spread. The Dukoff is less spread, okay? But I can't say that either one of them is brighter. This may be brighter, even. I just don't know. The Dukoff is more focused. They're similar in terms of brightness. I know. They're just different feeling, and that's something I can't really explain. I'll play them for you in a bit. Or maybe I'll just edit the mouthpieces into this video. I don't know. This is the stubby, though. Who knows how they did it? It's not braced together. It's a one-piece mouthpiece. There's no seam. So can we get the camera to cooperate? Come on now. All right. There's no seam here. This is some kind of a cast mouthpiece. And they just decided they're going to get in there with tooling, and they did. It's all rounded out in there. All right. So that's the Dukoff stubby, and we'll give that a blow too. Let's start off with the Dukoff stubby. All right. Here's our Dukoff stubby that we talked about. This is a 6. I don't think it's going to go well with the harder reed, so I'm going to try this one on it, and let's see. You know, we're just going to put a Tone Master ligature on it. I don't have the original ligature for this piece. They seem to not stand the test of time all that well. They're hard to find. But like you know, Otto Link Tone Master ligature will fit on it. It doesn't have the ridge, but oops. Well, look at that. It fits, but it doesn't tighten because it's too the ligature is too big. So let's try a smaller link ligature. We can't even barely get that one on there because the stubby is wider. That'll do. Okay, so it's on there. Boy, as far as stubbies go, I mean, that plays great. Wow. There's a reason why those are popular. I mean, it just has it's got a big sound with a lot of space in it and a lot of color, and then this sort of shimmering buzz on top. At least that's the way I feel it. And so now we'll look at, this is a later version. This is the true round chamber piece, okay? And we've got some differences here. Let's take a look. Big differences in the shank. Now, those of you, who aren't very observant, you're going to have to up your game because this requires visual acuity here. You see the difference in the way they cut these? See, these are narrow lines. You see, these are wide lines. See? These are like, I need a little pointer here. Why don't I get a disgusting reed to use? I'll get a disgusting reed. Here we go. Here's my academic pointer. Okay. Thin lines, see? Thin little divots. And look at those wide channels that they cut. Okay. Here and here. They're pretty wide. And then here you've got a beveled shank. See that? And here you have it's just cut off with a thin little rim at the end. Again, thin line, wide channel, and a straight straight curve up to the cut, and here it comes up, and it bevels. See, that comes up, and right here it bevels over. Bevels over right into that tooling there. Okay. Another point of note is that where's my disgusting reed? See how the cut for the shank curve here starts much later here. So that can vary, but generally speaking, that is the norm. You'll notice that the one on the left, which is the later one, has a longer barrel on both dimensions, once I line this up properly. You see? Longer to here, longer to there. The whole barrel's longer. This one is shorter. Now, that can vary, though, so I don't want to get too hung up on that part. Very small aesthetic differences. You just have to really be observant to see them. It's also right here and here. That here, this rolls. From the ledge, it rolls down, and here it's like comes to a straight and goes to a straight angle up. Not perfectly straight, but straighter. All right? You can see the bite plate is longer here as well. On this side, you can just see the differences in milling that I talked about. Another thing to take note of is that the one on the left, that the table is narrower, but this is not reliable. They can vary all over the place. The earlier ones can also be narrow. So this one is a 6. It's an original 6. It's a very rare and nice mouthpiece. And look at that, V170. Okay. So with the later period, the other one, the X, I think is just a prototype. Okay. Good mouthpiece, but it's the first one. Once they earnestly got into production with these, they all have the serial number V or B. V is in victory, B is in boy. I haven't seen any that had any others. When you see K and D, that's going to be the earlier period. X is going to be the transitional, and V and B will be the true round chamber Hollywood Dukoff. See? And this chamber is probably even smaller than the one we just looked at. So if you look at it, we compare them, I mean, we can kind of see the one on the left is like wider. The whole thing's just a little bit wider. There's a little bit more space in there. I can see in person more than I can show you on the camera, but this one's a little bit smaller inside, okay? And it's still got a pretty significant amount of baffle, but it's a slightly different finish. It's almost like an upside down V. It's like got an arrow shape to it, like we can kind of see it's kind of like it's like a V, like okay. So they've got a little bit hollowed out right here, but here you got like this baffle shape, okay, which is traditional Dukoff finish here, okay. There we go. All right, see that? There's your big baffle for Dukoff. I mean, that's good. Now, some of them really don't some of them, they're like, all right, whatever, and it came out without much baffle. I've had a few of those too. But generally speaking, they have about this amount. Can have a little more. Sometimes they have less and they play dark. Now, look at that squared off tip rail finish. This is typical. It's not too thin, not too thick. It's nicely finished and nicely squared off. Dukoff facings in general are not that bad. I think the Dukoff facings, they're better than the Links. They measure pretty good. Not too bad. The Links, some of them, it's like, oh God, they're just all over the place. Why bother calling it? Why call it measuring? Just call it throwing numbers at the wall and see what sticks. Sometimes they're pretty bad. But the Dukoffs are a little bit more reliable in terms of facing. And that finish is nice. Now, I can recognize, when you're experienced with restoring mouthpiece and such, I can recognize a Dukoff finished easily. Or whether or not the piece has been refaced. I can recreate this finish as well, but generally speaking, a lot of people just don't know. They just look at a mouthpiece, can't tell if it's refaced or not. Well, if you know what you're looking at, you can tell the hand that did the work. Okay, so here you go, 6 V170, beautiful original Dukoff. It's still got the plating, so that's what it is. This is a wonderful playing mouthpiece. Right. And now we'll go to the 6 V170. It's no longer a prototype. It's straight up Hollywood Dukoff 6. So this reed is a little bit soft for this size because it's just a 6. It's right on the edge. It's a little bit soft, but that's the accurate sound of the piece. The other hard reed over there would be too hard for this. The Hollywood came with this ligature. Okay, they actually came with. It has a ligature and a cover, which I'm going to see if I can find right now. So I found the Dukoff cover. And so the cover looks like this. There's your Dukoff cover. And the ligature goes upside down with the, well, it's not upside down for this mouthpiece, it's upside down for others. The screws go on the top, and you have sort of a smooth reed plate without the tension of the closing of those screws. And this goes like this. You see, it clasps, it grips the ligature at the top and protects the tip and reed at the bottom. There you go. There you go. There's your Dukoff Hollywood with the cover, okay? And there's your stubby, okay? And there's your little Dukoff family. Now, the stubby was also sold to, they provided those blanks to the Woodwind Company in New York that finished a number of those stubbies and labeled them as the Woodwind Company mouthpiece. And I have to say, the finish on those mouthpieces is great. Those Woodwind Company stubbies are incredibly good. Hard to find, though. There's not many out there. And they also licensed the Hollywood to someone named Sam Zimberoff, and they made the Zimberoff mouthpiece, of which I do not have any right now. But the Zimberoff is basically a Hollywood Dukoff. It's a little bit longer. The shank is a little bit longer. The finish is different because it's done by somebody else. They can run in some bigger sizes. The finish on the original Zimberoffs is usually pretty terrible. The facings measure wildly out of control, and they're just weird. They often need to be redone. But it's a very good blank. It's really just a Hollywood, but it feels a little bit bigger for some reason. I don't know why that is. And so that's the end of our Dukoff segment. Now we're going to go on to rubber links.